The sea was calm that morning, but Elizabeth Miller's world was anything but. 3 weeks after burying her husband, she boarded his luxury yacht with trembling hands. At 7 months pregnant, she had come to collect his belongings and say a final goodbye to the vessel he loved more than their home. Running her fingers along the polished wood paneling in his private study, she noticed something odd. A slight gap where there shouldn't be one. A gentle push revealed what 38 years of marriage had not. A hidden door sliding open to expose a room that shouldn't exist. Inside, photographs covered the walls, faces she'd never seen. Documents with names she didn't recognize. What secret life had Charles been hiding from her all these years? Elizabeth sank into the leather chair in Charles's study, her wedding ring catching the late afternoon light. 38 years of marriage condensed into a small gold band that suddenly felt foreign on her finger. She'd been a literature professor at Westlake University for 25 years before retiring 2 years ago. Charles had encouraged her to write that novel she'd always talked about. "Now's your time, Lizzie," he'd said with that reassuring smile that had first drawn her to him at a faculty dinner in Charles Miller, 15 years her senior, had built Miller Maritime Shipping from a small freight operation into an international company with 30 vessels crossing the world's ocean. He'd been semi-retired for the past decade, maintaining an office but delegating most operations to his executive team. His passion had been this yacht, the Persephone, named after the goddess who lived between two worlds. Their life together had been comfortable, loving, predictable. They'd tried for children early in their marriage, endured 2 miscarriages, then accepted their fate as a family of 2. When Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant at 61, the doctors called it a medical anomaly. Charles had wept with joy. "We'll need to be careful with you," he'd said, hand on her still flat stomach. "No stress. Promise me." 3 weeks ago, Charles had collapsed in his downtown office. Massive heart attack, the doctors said. No warning signs, nothing anyone could have done. She'd been in their garden when she got the call, pruning roses in the spring sunshine. By the time she reached the hospital, he was gone. The funeral had been a blur of dark suits and sympathetic murmurs. Business associates she'd met once or twice at company functions, a few close friends, no family left on either side. "Your husband was a great man," they'd all said, one after another, as if reading from the same inadequate script. Elizabeth had nodded numbly, one hand on her swelling belly where their miracle child grew, unaware that it would never know its father. She'd put off coming to the yacht. It had been Charles's sanctuary, his escape. Over the years he'd taken increasingly frequent solo voyages, sometimes for weeks at a stretch. Thinking time, he called it. Elizabeth had never pressed him about these absences. After decades together, they'd developed a comfortable independence. She had her books and garden. He had his sea. The yacht was docked at Marina del Rey, where it had permanent mooring. The executor of Charles's will had suggested selling it, but Elizabeth couldn't bear to make that decision yet. First, she needed to see it one last time, collect his personal items, face this part of him that had always remained somewhat separate from their shared life. Diego, the caretaker Charles had employed for years, had met her at the marina with a ring of keys and a solemn nod. "Miss Miller, I am very sorry for your loss," he'd said, his accent thick but his English precise. "Mr. Charles, he was a good man to work for." "Thank you, Diego. I just need some time aboard." "Of course, everything is as he left it. I have maintained it exactly as he instructed." There had been something in his tone, a carefulness that struck her as odd, but grief made everything seem strange these days. "Will you be staying long?" Diego had asked. "Just the afternoon. I need to gather some things." He'd nodded, handed her the keys. "I will be at the harbor office if you need anything." "Anything at all, Mrs. Miller." Now, sitting in Charles's study, surrounded by the polished wood and leather-bound books he'd loved, Elizabeth felt like an intruder. This space had been entirely his. She'd only visited the yacht a handful of times over the years, always by specific invitation, always for brief periods. Charles had never suggested she accompany him on his longer voyages. Her gaze returned to the hidden door, standing slightly ajar. She'd need to go back in there, face whatever truths waited. But first, she needed a moment to breathe. Elizabeth twisted her wedding ring, a habit from whenever she felt anxious. The simple gold band had been upgraded for their 30th anniversary. Charles had surprised her with a diamond-encircled replacement. New ring. Same promise, he'd said. Same promise. Had that been true, or had Charles Miller, the man she'd built a life with, been living a lie for years? The baby kicked, a sudden reminder of life, amid all this confusion about death. Elizabeth placed her hand on her belly. "Your father was a complicated man," she whispered. "I just never knew how complicated until today." Elizabeth gathered her courage and stepped out of the study, trailing her hand along the yacht's gleaming mahogany railings. The Persephone was impressive, even to her untrained eye. 72 feet of sleek luxury that had cost Charles a small fortune 5 years ago. "She's more than a boat," Charles had said when he first showed it to her. "She's freedom incarnate." Freedom from what? Elizabeth now wondered. The main salon featured panoramic windows and custom leather seating. A glass dining table that could seat 8 stood unused, perfectly polished. Elizabeth had only dined here twice. Once when Charles first acquired the yacht, and again on their 35th anniversary. Both times with just the two of them, though the space clearly could accommodate more. She moved carefully down the corridor, past 2 guest cabins that to her knowledge had never housed guests. Everything was immaculate, designed for comfort and luxury, yet it felt like a museum display, unlived in, or perhaps lived in only when she wasn't present. The master suite occupied the bow section, with a king-sized bed and windows offering a 180-degree view of the water. Charles's presence was stronger here, his favorite books on a small shelf, a worn leather notebook on the nightstand, his reading glasses folded neatly beside it. Elizabeth sat on the edge of the bed, remembering how Charles would speak of the sea with reverence. "There's something about the water, Lizzie, the solitude, the perspective it gives you." She'd never shared his passion. An untreated ear infection in childhood had left her with a susceptibility to motion sickness. Charles had never pressed her to join his voyages after a particularly miserable weekend trip early in their marriage. "The sea isn't for everyone," he'd said kindly. How convenient that had been for him, she thought bitterly. The bathroom was larger than one would expect on a yacht. Marble counters, a rainfall shower, even a small soaking tub. In the cabinet she found Charles's toiletries, arranged precisely. Everything a man would need for extended time away from home. Back in the corridor, she noticed a door she hadn't entered. The navigation room. This had been Charles's domain, the heart of his seafaring adventures. She hesitated before turning the handle. Inside was a sophisticated command center. Multiple screens, communication equipment, navigation systems, far more elaborate than seemed necessary for a recreational vessel. Charles had explained once that he spared no expense on safety and technology. "The ocean demands respect," he'd said. "Being underprepared out there can be fatal." Charts covered one wall with routes marked in Charles's precise handwriting. The Mediterranean, the Caribbean, South America. Had he really visited all these places alone? She traced one route with her finger, a journey down the coast of Argentina that he'd never mentioned taking. The ship's log sat open on the main console. Elizabeth flipped through its pages, noting Charles's meticulous record-keeping. Dates, coordinates, weather conditions, but between the technical details were curious gaps and cryptic notations that meant nothing to her. P delivered. One entry read, "Contact established with M." In another, "Cargo secured. Returning via alternate route." What cargo? Miller Maritime was Charles's business, but he'd never used the Persephone for commercial shipping. A ship's horn sounded somewhere in the marina, startling her. Elizabeth realized she'd been aboard for over an hour and had only scratched the surface. She returned to the main salon, trying to reconcile the yacht she was seeing with the one Charles had occasionally invited her to visit. Same vessel, different realities. Her phone rang. Diego calling from the harbor office. "Mrs. Miller, is everything all right?" "Yes, Diego. I'm just taking my time." A pause. "Would you like me to bring you anything? Water, perhaps? You should stay hydrated in your condition." His concern seemed genuine. "No, thank you. I'm fine. If I may ask, have you decided what you will do with the Persephone?" "Not yet. I need to understand it better first." Another pause. "Mr. Charles, he loved this boat very much." "Yes, I know." Elizabeth gazed out at the other vessels in the marina. Smaller boats, weekend pleasures for wealthy families. The Persephone stood out, larger, more serious somehow. "Diego, did my husband ever bring guests aboard when I wasn't here?" The silence on the line stretched too long to be innocent. "Diego?" "Mrs. Miller, I think perhaps we should speak in person. There are protocols Mr. Charles established." "Protocols? What does that mean?" "It would be better not to discuss over the phone." His voice had dropped lower. "I can come to the yacht in 20 minutes. Elizabeth's heart raced. "Yes, please do." She hung up and returned to the hidden room behind the study wall. Whatever game Charles had been playing, it seemed Diego was part of it. She needed to learn as much as possible before he arrived. Elizabeth returned to the hidden room, determined to gather as much information as possible before Diego arrived. The space was small but methodically organized, a compact command center hidden within the leisure vessel. The walls held maps with locations marked in red, photographs of Charles with people she'd never seen, mostly at ports or on what appeared to be other vessels. Some showed him in casual conversation, others in more formal settings, documents being exchanged. She picked up Charles's logbook from a small desk, distinct from the ship's official log she'd seen in the navigation room. This one was bound in worn leather, its pages filled with her husband's familiar handwriting, but the content was unfamiliar, coded in a way that made little sense. "MV Stellaris, GO 400 HR, package secured. J confirms next port, Gibraltar." Another entry, "Athens contact compromised, re-rated to Crete. Ra will handle the exchange." Elizabeth felt dizzy. The entries dated back years, coinciding with voyages Charles had described to her as solo sailing trips to clear my head. She found a drawer containing passports, all with Charles's photograph, but with different names. James Peterson, Alexander Grant, Michael Winters, each from a different country. Next to them lay bundles of currency, euros, pounds, yen, currencies she couldn't identify, not stored like a traveler's contingency fund, but organized like operational cash. A small safe was built into the wall, locked with a keypad. Elizabeth tried their anniversary date. Nothing. Charles's birthday. Nothing. Her birthday. Nothing. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, she tried the due date of their baby. The safe clicked open. Inside was a satellite phone, unlike any she'd seen before. Several USB drives labeled with dates. A small handgun that made her recoil. Charles had always claimed to hate firearms, and a sealed envelope with her name written on it. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. "Lizzie, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I've tried to protect you from this part of my life, but I always knew there might come a day when the walls between my worlds would crumble. There's so much to explain, more than I can put in a letter. Call the number programmed into the satellite phone. Tell them Odysseus has returned to Ithaca. They'll help you. Trust no one else until you speak with Sophia. I'm sorry, my love. Everything I've done for a reason." Elizabeth stared at the letter, reading it again and again. The handwriting was unmistakably Charles, but the words seemed to come from a stranger. She was about to reach for the satellite phone when she heard footsteps on the deck. Diego was early. Quickly, she photographed several pages of the logbook with her phone, pocketed the letter, and closed the safe. She had just slipped out of the hidden room, sliding the panel closed behind her, when Diego knocked on the cabin door. "Mrs. Miller?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, composing herself. "Come in, Diego." He entered, cap in hand, looking uncomfortable. His eyes darted around the study, lingering briefly on the wall with the hidden door. "You wanted to talk," Elizabeth prompted, settling into Charles's chair, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Diego nodded. "Mr. Charles, he left instructions. If anything happened to him, I was to assist you, but also to protect certain information." "What kind of information?" "Your husband's business was complicated. He helped people, important people, sometimes dangerous people. He ran a shipping company," Elizabeth said flatly. Diego's smile was sad. "That was one part of what he did, yes. And the other parts? I don't know everything. I only know what I needed to know to help him when the Persephone was involved." "Which was what exactly?" Diego giggled uncomfortably. "Sometimes the yacht carried special cargo. Sometimes special passengers. People? Charles was smuggling people? Not smuggling, Mrs. Miller. Rescuing. There is a difference." Elizabeth's mind reeled. The Charles she knew donated to charities, attended fundraising galas, wrote checks for disaster relief. But direct involvement? Secret missions on his yacht? "I don't believe you," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't true. The hidden room told a different story about her husband than the one she'd lived with for nearly 4 decades. "Miss Charles said you might find certain things confusing. He left something for you, a recording. He made me promise to give it to you if—" Diego trailed off. "If he died," Elizabeth finished. Diego nodded, reaching into his jacket. "This explains more than I can. But Miss Miller, watching it may put you in danger. Once you know, you cannot unknow." He held out a small USB drive. Elizabeth stared at it for a long moment before taking it from his hand. "I need to understand who my husband really was, Diego. I've earned that much." Elizabeth inserted the USB drive into Charles's laptop in the study. Diego had excused himself, saying, "Some things are meant to be private, Mrs. Miller. I'll be at the harbor office when you're ready." The screen flickered to life and suddenly Charles was there, sitting in this very study, looking directly at her. Elizabeth's breath caught. He appeared tired, older than she remembered, though the recording couldn't have been made long ago. "Lizzie," he began, his voice so achingly familiar it brought tears to her eyes. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And you've discovered the room. I've rehearsed this speech 1,000 times over the years, hoping I'd never have to deliver it," he sighed, rubbing his temple in that characteristic gesture she knew so well. "First, I need you to know that everything between us was real. Our marriage, our life together, that was never a lie. But there are parts of my life I kept from you, to protect you." He shifted in his chair. 35 years ago, before we met, I was approached by an intelligence agency. My shipping business gave me access to ports worldwide, made me a valuable asset. I was recruited for what they called passive intelligence gathering. Observe and report. That's how it started. Charles looked down briefly. Then things changed. I saw things during my travels: human trafficking, refugees desperate for escape from war zones and oppressive regimes. I couldn't just watch anymore, so my role evolved. He explained how the Persephone had been specially designed with hidden compartments, how he'd used it to transport people to safety, gather intelligence in dangerous waters, occasionally move sensitive materials for government operations. "I became a ghost ship of sorts," he said with a sad smile, "moving between worlds just like the goddess she's named for." Elizabeth paused the video. Overwhelmed, she rose on unsteady feet and made her way back to the hidden room. pushing the panel open. This time, she studied it more carefully, not just as a shocking discovery, but as a key to understanding the man she thought she knew completely. The walls were covered, not just with maps and photos, but with news clippings, political crises in various countries, refugee situations, naval blockades, security conference announcements. She noticed a pattern in the photographs now. Many showed Charles with the same few people in different settings. One face appeared more frequently than others, a striking woman with dark hair, always standing slightly apart, watchful. In one photo, Charles and this woman were examining documents on what appeared to be the Perseme's deck. Their body language suggested professional focus, but something in their familiarity made Elizabeth's stomach tighten. She returned to the computer and resumed the video. The agency provided me with alternate identities, funding for operations, technical support. In exchange, I delivered information, transported assets, occasionally provided a floating safe house. Charles ran a hand through his hair. It sounds like a spy thriller. I know, but it was mostly long stretches of mundane work, punctuated by moments of intensity. He leaned forward. I never told you because this life comes with risks. Knowledge is dangerous. There are people who would hurt you to get to me, or to what I know. I couldn't bear that. His expression softened. When you told me about the baby, I made a decision to end this part of my life. I've been working on an exit strategy. My last mission was supposed to conclude next month. His voice caught. I wanted to be just Charles Miller again. Your husband, our child's father. Elizabeth felt a fresh wave of grief. He'd been planning to come back to her fully, just as death took him away. If something's happened to me before I could complete that transition, you may be vulnerable. The false wall panel was designed to be discovered only by someone searching carefully. It should have remained hidden from casual observation. If you found it accidentally, you may have been observed. The seriousness in his tone sent a chill through her. In the satellite phone in my safe, there's a number. Call it and say exactly this. Odysseus has returned to Ithaca. The person who answers will help you. Her name is Sophia. She's been my handler for 15 years. Trust her, Lizzie. She knows how to keep you safe. He paused, emotion crossing his face. I'm so sorry for keeping this from you. I told myself it was for your protection, but perhaps it was also cowardice. I couldn't bear to see disappointment in your eyes, or fear, or worse, to have you ask me to choose between this work and our life together. Charles looked directly into the camera, his eyes glistening. I love you, Elizabeth. Everything else in my life may have had shadows, but never that, never us. The video ended, leaving Elizabeth staring at a blank screen, the hidden room's secrets waiting behind her. Elizabeth returned to the hidden room, drawn to the photographs of the dark-haired woman, Sophia, Charles's handler for 15 years. In one image they stood side by side on a beach, casual clothes, sunglasses, tropical drinks in hand. They looked like vacationers, not operatives. Charles's smile was relaxed, in a way Elizabeth rarely saw at home. Another showed them at what appeared to be a gala, Charles in a tuxedo, Sophia in an elegant black dress, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they spoke with a man whose face had been blurred in the photo. Elizabeth searched through the desk drawers until she found a folder labeled Corsica 2018. Inside were more photographs, Charles and Sophia on the Persephone, dining at a small cafe, walking along ancient ruins. Operational photographs, perhaps. Yet the casual intimacy between them was unmistakable. One image caught her attention, Charles asleep on the yacht's deck chair, Sophia watching him with an expression that was anything but professional. Elizabeth sank into the desk chair, her hand instinctively moving to her pregnant belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her distress. Was he unfaithful? She whispered to the empty room. She thought of the separate lives they'd led, her teaching, his business travel, the comfortable distance that had grown between them over decades. They'd loved each other, yes, but had they truly known each other? The satellite phone felt heavy in her hand as she retrieved it from the safe. One number was programmed into it. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What would you say to this woman? This Sophia, who had shared a part of Charles's life that had been completely hidden from her, who might have shared more than just his professional secrets. The baby kicked again, more insistently this time, a reminder of what was at stake. Whatever Charles had been involved in, whatever his relationship with this woman, Elizabeth needed to know if she and her child were in danger. She pressed call. 3 rings, then a cautious answer. This line is secure. Identify. Elizabeth swallowed hard. Odysseus has returned to Ithaca, a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Charles? No, Elizabeth said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. This is his wife. Silence stretched between them. Mrs. Miller. The woman's voice was carefully neutral now. I'm very sorry for your loss. Are you Sophia? Another pause. Yes. My husband left a message, telling me to contact you, he said. Elizabeth struggled to keep her voice even. He said you would help keep me safe. Where are you now? On his yacht. The Persephone. Are you alone? Yeah. Well, the caretaker, Diego, is at the harbor office. Diego is trustworthy. Sophia's voice softened slightly. Mrs. Miller, how much do you know? I found a hidden room, passports with different names, money, a gun, and a lot of photographs, including many of you and my husband. The silence that followed was weighted. I need to ask you something, Elizabeth said, surprising herself with her directness. Were you and Charles lovers? A sharp, surprised laugh came through the line. No, Mrs. Miller. Absolutely not. You seem very close in these photographs. We played roles, created appearances useful for our work. Sophia's voice was firm. Charles spoke of you often. He loved you very deeply. Elizabeth wasn't sure whether to believe her. Then what were you to each other? Partners, colleagues, friends. Eventually, we trusted each other with our lives. In our line of work, that creates a bond. Sophia paused. But never that kind of relationship. Charles was devoted to you. Elizabeth stared at the photographs, trying to reconcile this explanation with what she saw. Miss Miller, I understand you have questions, many questions, but right now, we need to focus on your safety. If you've discovered the hidden room, others might know as well. What others? Who would be watching? Charles was involved in some sensitive operation. His last mission was particularly delicate. High-level corruption in shipping channels, government officials taking bribes to allow human trafficking through certain ports. Elizabeth tried to process this information. Her literature professor husband had been investigating human trafficking rings. You're 7 months pregnant, correct? Sophia asked. Yes. How did you? Charles told me. He was very happy about becoming a father. Sophia's voice softened momentarily before returning to its professional tone. We need to move you to a secure location. I can be at Marina Nal Rey in 40 minutes. I'm not going anywhere with you, Elizabeth said firmly. I don't know you. I don't know if anything you're saying is true. Mrs. Miller, Elizabeth, I understand your hesitation, but Charles's concern for your safety wasn't theoretical. The people he was investigating are dangerous and resourceful. If I'm in danger, I'll call the police. Sophia's laugh was sharp and without humor. And tell them what? That your recently deceased husband was a covert operative, that you found a hidden room full of classified materials. The authorities can't help you with this. Elizabeth stared at a photograph of Charles and Sophia laughing together on a sunlit deck. Give me one reason why I should trust you. Because Charles did, Sophia replied simply. And because I made him a promise when he told me about the baby. I promised I would protect you both if anything happened to him. I intend to keep that promise whether you trust me or not. Elizabeth ended the call with Sophia without committing to meeting her. She needed more information, and there was one person nearby who might have it. She found Diego in the harbor office, bent over a logbook. He straightened when he saw her, concern evident in his weathered face. Mrs. Miller, you've watched the recording. Yes. She closed the office door. I need to know more, Diego. How long have you worked for my husband? 7 years on the Persumi. Before that, 3 years on his cargo vessels. And during that time you were aware of his other activities. Diego nodded cautiously. I knew enough to do my job. Which was what exactly? Maintain the yacht, prepare it for special voyages. Keep records of who came and went. Ensure privacy. Elizabeth pulled out her phone, showing him a photo she'd taken of the marina logbook she'd found in the hidden room. This shows the Persumi making 27 trips in the past 3 years. I was only aware of 9. Diego's expression remained neutral. I've just spoken with someone named Sophia, Elizabeth continued. She claims my husband was involved in investigating human trafficking operations. A flicker of recognition crossed Diego's face. Miss Sophia, yes. She and Mr. Charles worked closely. Were they lovers? The question clearly surprised him. No, Mrs. Miller, never. Mr. Charles spoke of you with great respect, but he lied to me for decades. Diego looked uncomfortable. It was complicated, uncomplicated for me. Elizabeth's tone was sharp. I'm carrying his child, Diego. I deserve to know what kind of man the father of my baby really was. Diego gestured to the chairs in the corner of the office. Once they were seated, he spoke in a low voice. Mr. Charles began using the Persephone for special operations about 6 years ago. Before that, he used his cargo ships, but they attracted too much attention. What kind of operations? Mostly transport. People who needed to disappear, documents that needed to move without official channels. Sometimes surveillance in waters where larger government vessels would be noticed. And you helped him. My brother and his family were rescued from Venezuela by people like Mr. Charles. Political refugees with death sentences, waiting if they stayed. Diego's eyes held a quiet intensity. When Mr. Charles approached me about the Persephone, I agreed immediately. It was an honor to assist in such work. Elizabeth tried to reconcile this with the husband she knew, the man who dozed through charity galas, who complained about the lengthy international news segments on television, who seemed content with his semi-retirement and occasional sailing trips. There were others who came aboard regularly, she asked. Miss Sophia most frequently, Mr. Reeves from the agency, a doctor sometimes when medical care was needed for passengers. Passengers, Elizabeth repeated, refugees, sometimes, defectors, witnesses needing protection. Once a family with young children. Diego's expression softened at the memory. Mr. Charles arranged their quarters himself, brought toys for the little one. Elizabeth felt a strange pang, Charles preparing a space for unknown children, while his own child grew within her, unknown to him for the first 3 months of her pregnancy. She'd waited to tell him, afraid at her age that the pregnancy wouldn't last. Did anyone unusual come aboard in the weeks before his death? Diego tensed slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. You know exactly what I mean. Was he working on something dangerous, something that might have gotten him killed? Diego looked away. Miss Charles's heart attack. Was it really a heart attack, Diego? His silence was answer enough. Tell me about his last mission, Elizabeth pressed. I don't know details, but there was a man, I only saw him once. Mr. Charles seemed unsettled after his visit. That was 3 weeks before he died. A name? I heard Mr. Charles call him Garrett. They argued in the study. When this Garrett left, Mr. Charles told me to perform a complete security sweep of the vessel. Looking for what? Listening devices, trackers. He wouldn't explain. Diego hesitated. 2 days later, he recorded that message for you. And he gave me this. Diego removed an envelope from his jacket pocket. He said to give it to you only after you'd found the hidden room and spoken to Miss Sophia. Elizabeth took the envelope with unsteady hands. Inside was a key and a handwritten note. Marina storage locker, Yacht. What you find there will explain everything. Be careful, Lizzie. Claire, where is this locker? At the north end of the marina. Diego looked at his watch. Mrs. Miller, you said you spoke with Miss Sophia. Yes, briefly. Will she be coming here? She offered to. I didn't agree to anything. Diego nodded, thoughtfully. Mr. Charles trusted her above all others, but he also said that if anything happened to him, your safety would be my responsibility until Miss Sophia took over. I don't need a handler, Diego. Perhaps not. But Mr. Charles believed you might need protection. He gestured to the marina through the window. And there's a man who's been watching the yacht since shortly after you arrived. Black sedan, north parking lot. Elizabeth's breath caught. Could just be another boat owner. He hasn't moved in 3 hours, Diego said quietly, and he was here last week too, watching from the same spot. She felt the baby shift inside her, a protective hand moving instinctively to her belly. I think, Diego said carefully, it would be wise to see what's in that storage locker before Miss Sophia arrives. And I think you should not go alone. Elizabeth huddled in the passenger seat of Diego's weathered pickup truck as they circled the marina parking lot, taking an indirect route to the storage facilities. The black sedan was still there, its windows tinted, impossible to see who might be watching from inside. Keep your head down, Diego advised, making another turn that would shield them from view. This is absurd, Elizabeth muttered, though she complied. I'm a 63-year-old pregnant woman, not a spy. Perhaps, but you are carrying precious cargo, both Charles's child and now his secrets. They parked behind the storage building, using a service entrance to access the facility. The key opened a medium-sized locker near the back. Diego stood watch, while Elizabeth lifted the rolling door. Inside was a hard-sided suitcase. Nothing else. She pulled it out, surprised by its weight. Should we open it here? Diego scanned the empty corridor. Better not. We should return to the yacht. What about our observer in the sedan? We'll use the marina's south entrance. It's less visible. Back on the Persephone, they secured the cabin doors before opening the suitcase on the salon table. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a satellite phone, newer and more sophisticated than the one in Charles's safe, along with a laptop, several external hard drives, and a thick manila envelope. I've never seen these before, Diego said, frowning. Miss Charles must have kept them completely separate from the yacht. Elizabeth opened the envelope first. Inside were detailed financial records, offshore accounts, transaction histories, corporate structures with Charles's name buried deep within layers of subsidiaries. Attached was a handwritten note. Follow the money. See. The laptop was password protected. Elizabeth tried the same combinations she'd attempted on the safe. None worked. Any ideas? She asked Diego. Perhaps something personal, anniversary, first date. Those failed too. Elizabeth sat back, thinking, what would Charles choose as a password for his most sensitive information? Something no one would guess, yet something he wouldn't forget. A memory surfaced. Charles bringing her breakfast in bed on her 60th birthday. To my Persephone, he'd said, using the pet name he'd given her years ago when he'd first become fascinated with Greek mythology. My Queen of Two Worlds, Academia, and my heart. She typed Queen of Two Worlds into the password field. The screen unlocked. How did you know? Diego asked. I didn't. Just a hunch. Elizabeth felt a pang of vindication. Whatever secrets Charles had kept, he'd still held their intimate moments close. The laptop contained hundreds of files organized meticulously: ship manifests, port authority documents, financial transfers, surveillance photos of men in expensive suits, meeting on docks, on yachts, in private clubs. One face appeared repeatedly, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. Do you recognize him? She asked Diego, pointing to the recurring figure. Diego's expression darkened. Minister Garrett, very powerful man, head of the Maritime Transportation Authority. The same Garrett who visited Charles before his death. Diego nodded grimly. Elizabeth opened a folder, labeled Operation Clean Harbor. Inside were reports detailing an extensive investigation into corruption within international shipping channels. According to the documents, Minister Garrett was facilitating human trafficking operations through official ports by accepting massive bribes to look the other way during inspections. Charles was building a case against him, Elizabeth murmured, scanning the files. Financial trails, witness statements, photographic evidence. This would explain much, Diego said quietly. Mr. Charles was becoming increasingly cautious in recent months. Changed security protocols, limited who could board the Persephone. Yet he let this man on his yacht, perhaps to maintain appearances, or perhaps Garrett suspected Charles was investigating him. Elizabeth finished. She found an audio file dated 3 days before Charles's death. Her hand hesitated over the play button. The satellite phone rang, startling them both. The screen showed only secure call. Sophia, Elizabeth wondered aloud. Diego checked his watch. It's been almost an hour since you spoke with her. Elizabeth answered, putting it on speaker. Hello, Mrs. Miller. Sophia's voice was tense. Are you still on the yacht? Yes, but you need to leave immediately. Our surveillance picked up chatter. Garrett's people know you're there and what you might have found. Elizabeth's eyes met Diego's alarmed gaze. How would they know that? We suspect there's a leak somewhere in our organization. Has anyone unusual approached you today? No, just Diego, the caretaker. Good. He's clean. Is he with you now? Yes. Diego, Sophia addressed him directly. Get Mrs. Miller off that yacht now. Take only what's essential. I'm sending a team to meet you at the secondary extraction point. Understood, Diego replied with a crispness that reminded Elizabeth this wasn't his first such situation. What's happening? Elizabeth demanded. I still don't understand. Your husband was killed, Miss Miller, Sophia cut in. Not a heart attack. Poison designed to mimic one. Garrett discovered Charles was building a case against him and his trafficking network. The evidence you've just found in that storage locker is what we need to bring down his entire operation. How do you know about the storage locker? Elizabeth asked sharply. Because Charles told me about it the day before he died. It's why they haven't made a move on you yet. They're hoping you'll lead them to exactly what you've just found. The satellite phone beeped with an incoming message, a marina security camera feed, showing 3 men approaching the Persephone slip. They're already there, Sophia said urgently. Use exit protocol 7, Diego. Now, Diego was already moving, shutting the laptop and returning it to the suitcase. This way, Mrs. Miller. Quickly, Diego led Elizabeth through a hidden access panel in the yacht's lower deck. Another secret she never knew existed. They emerged on the opposite side from where the men were boarding, slipping into a small motorboat moored in the Persephone's shadow. Charles installed emergency exits on all his vessels, Diego explained, starting the engine with practiced efficiency. Stay low. They sped away from the marina, hugging the coastline. Elizabeth clutched the suitcase to her chest, her mind racing as fast as the boat cutting through the water. The baby shifted uncomfortably, responding to her adrenaline. Where are we going? She shouted over the engine's roar. Safe house in Venice Beach. Miss Sophia will meet us there. 20 minutes later, they docked at a private slip behind an unassuming beachfront property. A slender woman with dark hair waited on the deck, the woman from the photographs. Sophia, in person, she was older than Elizabeth had expected, perhaps early 50s, with intelligent eyes that assessed everything in a glance. She wore simple dark clothing that wouldn't attract attention, but Elizabeth noted the slight bulge of a weapon beneath her jacket. Mrs. Miller, Sophia helped her from the boat. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Elizabeth studied the woman who had shared so much of her husband's secret life. You look different than in the photos. A hint of a smile, that's often the point. Come inside quickly. The beach house was sparsely furnished, but comfortable. Security cameras monitored the approaches from all directions, feeds displaying on a tablet. Sophia kept close. You're safe here for now, Sophia said, checking the windows. This property isn't connected to Charles in any traceable way. Another thing I didn't know about my husband, Elizabeth said bitterly, setting the suitcase on the coffee table. Sophia's expression softened slightly. He protected you the only way he knew how, by keeping you separate from this world. By lying to me. By compartmentalizing, Sophia corrected. It's what we're trained to do. And what agency trained you exactly? Elizabeth demanded. That's still classified. But I can tell you Charles was one of our most valuable assets. His shipping business gave him access and cover that traditional operatives couldn't achieve. Diego had been securing the perimeter, and now joined them. The boat is concealed, no signs of pursuit. Sophia nodded. Good work, Diego. She turned to Elizabeth. I understand you found Charles's evidence cache. Yes? Elizabeth patted the suitcase. Though I'm still trying to understand what it all means. It means your husband was a hero, Sophia said, her professional demeanor slipping for a moment to reveal genuine emotion. He spent years building a case against one of the most sophisticated human trafficking networks in the Western Hemisphere. Minister Garrett is just the visible piece. Behind him is an organization that has transported thousands of vulnerable people into forced labor and worse, and this evidence can bring them down, with the financial trails Charles uncovered. Yes, that's why they killed him. That's why they're after you now. Elizabeth's hand moved protectively to her belly. My husband died for this. He died trying to make the world safer for your child, Sophia said quietly. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. He wanted you to have this. I've been carrying it since the day before he died. Elizabeth opened the pouch. Inside was a silver necklace with a pomegranate pendant, a symbol of Persephone from Greek mythology. She recognized it instantly as matching one Charles had given her for their 30th anniversary. He had it made at the same time as yours, Sophia explained. He kept this one in our safe at headquarters. The day before he died, he gave it to me and said, if anything happens, make sure Elizabeth gets this. She'll understand what it means. Elizabeth's vision blurred with tears as she held the necklace. The pendant opened like a locket, revealing a tiny compartment inside, containing a micro SD card. Another piece of evidence? Sophia looked surprised. I don't know. He never mentioned what was inside. Elizabeth slid the card into the laptop. A single video file appeared on the screen. She clicked play. Charles appeared, sitting in their garden at home. Lizzie, my love, if you're watching this, then you've met Sophia and learned about my other life. I recorded this message the day after you told me about the baby. His smile was tender, genuine. I spent decades living between worlds, but the moment you shared our miracle with me, I knew I was done with the shadows. I've given Sophia my formal resignation letter. This current investigation will be my last assignment. He looked directly into the camera. I've arranged everything for our future. A clean break from this life. Financial security. A new beginning focused solely on our family. The evidence I've gathered will ensure Garrett and his network are dismantled, and then we can truly be free. Elizabeth touched the screen, tears flowing freely now. I never meant to deceive you, Charles continued. Every moment with you was the most genuine part of my life. The only real home I've ever known was in your arms. He paused, emotion crossing his face. I hope someday you'll forgive me for the secrets I kept. Know that everything I did to make the world better for those who couldn't protect themselves, and now to make it better for our child. The video ended. Elizabeth looked up to find Sophia watching her with an uncharacteristically gentle expression. He loved you very much, Sophia said quietly. In all our years working together, you were the only thing he never doubted. The evening stretched into night as Elizabeth, Sophia, and Diego worked through Charles's evidence. Spread across the safe house's dining table were financial records, photographs, and transcripts of recorded conversations, all meticulously organized and annotated in Charles's precise handwriting. He was thorough, Sophia observed, examining a diagram of shell companies linked to Minister Garrett. More thorough than most trained operatives, Charles always had an eye for detail, Elizabeth said softly. He could spot a misplaced comma in a 300-page contract. Sophia nodded. That's what made him invaluable to us. He saw patterns others missed. Diego brought them coffee. Elizabeth declined, accepting tea instead. Her head was spinning with information, names of corrupt officials, dates of suspicious shipments, accounts holding millions in unexplained funds, all connecting back to Garrett and a network that spanned continents. "I still don't understand how my husband became involved in all this," Elizabeth said, setting aside a particularly disturbing report about young women transported in shipping containers. Sophia inserted a USB drive into the laptop. "Perhaps this will help. Charles recorded this 3 years ago as part of our standard operational history." The video showed Charles sitting in a nondescript room, speaking directly to the camera. Operational background statement. August 2019, he began formally. "My involvement began in 1985 when I was approached by Agent Callahan while expanding Miller Maritime into Southeast Asian markets. Initial recruitment was for passive intelligence gathering, observations of unusual port activities, monitoring of certain vessels of interest." He described how, over time, his role had evolved. During a voyage near Myanmar in 1992, he'd witnessed a cargo ship offloading what appeared to be laborers in chains. "I provided documentation to my handler, expecting authorities to intervene. Instead, I was told the situation was politically complicated." Charles's expression in the video hardened. "That was unacceptable to me. I began developing my own network of contacts. Dock workers, sailors, local officials who weren't compromised. I mapped trafficking routes independently." Elizabeth watched, mesmerized, as her husband described a side of himself she'd never glimpsed. Determined, passionate about justice, willing to take risks for those who couldn't protect themselves. "By 2003, I had enough evidence to force the agency to act against a major trafficking operation in the Philippines. That became the template for my future work. Gather evidence too compelling to ignore, present it through official channels, ensure action." He explained how, after acquiring the Persephone in 2016, his capabilities expanded. The yacht provided mobility and privacy that commercial vessels couldn't. "We've since conducted 17 rescue operations and gathered evidence leading to the dismantling of 5 separate trafficking networks." The video ended with Charles looking directly into the camera. "This work has cost me personally. The compartmentalization required means those closest to me can never know this part of my life. That burden is mine alone to bear." Sophia stopped the playback. "Charles saved hundreds of lives, Mrs. Miller, both directly through rescue operations and indirectly through the networks he helped dismantle." Elizabeth sat in silence, absorbing this new dimension of the man she'd loved. Why Garrett? What made Charles target him specifically? Sophia hesitated, exchanging a glance with Diego. "What aren't you telling me?" Elizabeth pressed. Sophia sighed. "The Persephone's last rescue operation was in April. A fishing vessel in distress off the Turkish coast, supposedly. When we arrived, we found 23 people, mostly young women, being transported for exploitation in Europe. We got them all to safety," Diego added. "But one of the girls recognized Garrett from a photo. Charles had. Said he'd personally inspected their cargo before departure." Charles was furious. Sophia continued. "Garrett wasn't just facilitating trafficking through bureaucratic channels, he was actively involved, selecting victims. Charles became obsessed with bringing him down. And Garrett discovered he was being investigated." Elizabeth concluded. "We believe so. About a month before Charles died, our secure communications showed signs of compromise. Someone had access to information they shouldn't have." Elizabeth frowned. "A leak in your organization?" "Possibly," Sophia admitted. "We haven't identified the source yet." Elizabeth reached for a folder labeled Lighthouse Project that she hadn't examined yet. Inside were detailed plans for what appeared to be a charitable foundation, along with legal documents establishing a trust in the name of Baby Miller. Charles was creating a legacy, Sophia explained. The Lighthouse Foundation would continue his work. Legitimate refugee assistance, trafficking victim support, educational initiatives, funded with $5 million. Elizabeth noted, reviewing the financial arrangements. Money I never knew we had. His compensation for intelligence work went into separate accounts. He intended it all for this purpose, and for your child's future. Elizabeth felt overwhelmed, grief, pride, and anger swirling together. All these years I thought I knew him. You did know him, Sophia said gently. The core of who Charles was, his values, his heart. That's the man you married, the methods and details he kept from you, but never his essential self. The encrypted phone on the table buzzed with an incoming message. Sophia checked it, her expression growing serious. My team has confirmed that Garrett knows about this evidence. He's deployed resources to find you. She looked at Elizabeth gravely. The next 24 hours will determine whether Charles's final mission succeeds or fails. Sophia insisted they move again before dawn. We have multiple safe houses. Never stay in one location more than 12 hours. Standard protocol. They packed Charles's evidence into secure cases. As Diego loaded the van, Elizabeth explored the beach house's back room, which Sophia had been using as a temporary operations center. On the desk sat an open medical kit, not a standard first aid kit, but a comprehensive trauma pack with surgical supplies, medications, and equipment for emergency procedures. Planning for worst-case scenarios, Elizabeth asked when Sophia entered. Always, Sophia closed the kit. Charles insisted on medical supplies at every extraction point. Said we never knew what condition people would be in when we found them. Elizabeth gestured to a cabinet with combination locks. And what's in there? After a moment's hesitation, Sophia opened it, revealing hidden compartments built into the wall. Supplies, documentation, emergency provisions. But Elizabeth had already spotted something else. A small stuffed bear tucked in one compartment, alongside children's clothing and infant formula. We've transported families with young children, Sophia explained, following Elizabeth's gaze. Charles was adamant about making the journey as comfortable as possible for them. Elizabeth picked up the bear, trying to imagine Charles, her Charles, who'd always been somewhat awkward around their friends' grandchildren, carefully selecting comfort items for frightened refugee children. There's so much I didn't know, she murmured. He wanted to tell you, Sophia said quietly, especially after you told him about the baby. He said having a child changed everything, made his work feel both more urgent and more dangerous. Elizabeth returned the bear to its place. Did you work with him on these rescue operations? Most of them I coordinated from a distance usually, but occasionally joined on board when the situation required it, like when you were both photographed in Corsica. Sophia smiled slightly. That was a deep cover operation. We posed as a wealthy couple touring the Mediterranean while tracking a diplomat involved in Garrett's network. You played the role of his mistress quite convincingly, Elizabeth observed, her tone neutral. It was just that a role. Charles never crossed professional boundaries. Sophia paused. He spoke of you often, you know, especially when missions went long. He'd share stories about your life together, your teaching career, how you could recite entire passages of literature from memory. This revelation caught Elizabeth by surprise. He talked about me. He carried a photo of you in his wallet, the real one, not his cover identities. Said it reminded him what was real when everything else was pretense. Before Elizabeth could respond, Diego appeared in the doorway. We need to move. Car just passed by for the third time. Sophia immediately shifted to operational mode. Take the coastal route. I'll follow with Mrs. Miller in the second vehicle after 20 minutes. Meet at location Echo. As Diego left, Elizabeth asked, Location Echo. Another safe house, more secure than this one, with better medical facilities. You're concerned about the baby. Charles would never forgive me if anything happened to either of you. Sophia checked her weapon. We should prepare to move. Elizabeth followed her to the main room, where one final item caught her attention, a framed photograph facing downward on a bookshelf. She turned it over to find a group picture. Charles, Sophia, Diego, and several others standing on the Persephone's deck. They looked tired but satisfied, with the unmistakable bond of people who had accomplished something meaningful together. When was this taken? Elizabeth asked. After a rescue off Libya, 27 people, including 4 children. Sophia's professional mask slipped momentarily. That was the operation that changed Charles. We found a hidden compartment on a cargo ship where people had been kept for weeks. The conditions were unimaginable. That explains his insistence on comfortable quarters on the Persephone, Elizabeth said, recalling the yacht's unexpectedly well-appointed guest cabins. He converted the storage areas into contingency spaces that could house up to 30 people without compromising the vessel's appearance. Sophia took the photograph, studying it briefly before packing it away. Charles designed most of the modifications himself, said if we were going to rescue people from inhumane conditions, we wouldn't replicate them, even temporarily. Elizabeth thought of the elegant yacht with its hidden chambers and escape routes. The Persephone, Queen of Two Worlds. I always thought he named it that because of my nickname. Perhaps both meanings were true to him, Sophia suggested. They heard a car approaching outside. Sophia moved swiftly to the window, hand on her weapon. Black SUV, tinted windows, she reported. This isn't one of ours. She guided Elizabeth toward the back door. We need to use the secondary exit. What about the evidence? Elizabeth gestured to the remaining case. Grab only the essentials. The rest is digitally backed up. Sophia opened a hidden panel in the floor, revealing a narrow passage. This leads to the boathouse. We have a vessel waiting. As Elizabeth descended into the passage, she heard vehicles pulling up outside. Garrett's people, she whispered. Sophia nodded grimly, securing the panel above them. They're getting bolder, but so did Charles with every operation. And he taught me well. They moved through the narrow tunnel, lit only by Sophia's flashlight. Elizabeth felt the baby kick vigorously, responding to her elevated heart rate. It's okay, she whispered, one hand on her belly. Your father prepared for this. Apparently, he prepared for everything. Location Echo turned out to be a modernist house, nestled in the Topanga Canyon Hills, isolated and with commanding views of the surrounding area. By the time Elizabeth and Sophia arrived, Diego had already secured the perimeter and established communications with Sophia's team. Any sign of pursuit? Sophia asked him. None yet, but we should assume they're looking. Diego handed them both bottles of water. The house is stocked, and the security system is active. Elizabeth sank gratefully onto a sofa, her back aching from tension and pregnancy. The last 24 hours had transformed her understanding of her life completely. She felt unmoored, adrift in a world where nothing was as it seemed, not even her decades-long marriage. Sophia set up a laptop on the dining table, establishing an encrypted connection. I'm uploading the evidence to our secure servers. We'll need to move quickly once everything's in place. Move quickly how? Elizabeth asked. Coordinated action. Law enforcement in multiple jurisdictions will move simultaneously against key members of Garrett's network. Sophia typed rapidly. The evidence Charles gathered gives us leverage, but only if we use it before Garrett can cover his tracks or eliminate witnesses. Diego switched on a television, monitoring news channels. Nothing yet about the Marina incident. They'll keep it quiet, Sophia replied. Garrett won't want attention. Elizabeth noticed a folder on the coffee table labeled Security Surveillance. Opening it, she found photographs. Surveillance photos of her own home, her gardening, walking to the mailbox, shopping at the local market. What is this? She demanded, holding up the images. Sophia paused her work. After Charles began investigating Garrett specifically, we implemented surveillance on your residence. Standard protective protocol. You were watching me. For how long? 6 months. Charles was concerned about potential retaliation. Elizabeth flipped through more photos, her at a doctor's appointment, having lunch with a friend, attending a memorial service for a former colleague, her entire life, monitored without her knowledge or consent. This is invasive, she said, anger rising. Did Charles approve all of this? He established the protocol himself, Sophia said quietly. He was trying to protect you, by spying on me, by invading every private moment of my life, by ensuring you were safe. Sophia's tone remained measured. These weren't for voyeuristic purposes, Mrs. Miller. They were to identify anyone taking undue interest in you, anyone following you, any potential threats. Elizabeth looked more carefully at the surveillance photos. In several, there were markings indicating other individuals in the frame. A man reading a newspaper, too long at a cafe across from her regular lunch spot. A service van parked near her home 3 days in a row. A jogger who appeared in multiple locations. These people were watching me, she asked, her anger shifting to unease. We believe they were Garrett's people. Yes. They began surveillance shortly after Charles confronted Garrett about discrepancies in shipping manifests. Sophia came to sit opposite Elizabeth. Charles didn't tell you about his work, but that doesn't mean he didn't take every possible measure to protect you from its consequences. Elizabeth processed this information, absently rubbing her belly as the baby shifted. When did he plan to tell me? After completing the Garrett investigation. Sophia's expression softened slightly. He'd already begun preparations for an exit strategy. New identities, a property in New Zealand, financial arrangements that couldn't be traced. He wanted a clean slate for your family. Diego, who had been monitoring the security feeds, called out, "Vehicle approaching." Black SUV similar to the one at the beach house. Sophia moved immediately to the window, staying to one side as she peered out. How did they find us so quickly? Diego checked another monitor. No other vehicles. Could be advanced surveillance. Or they tracked us somehow, Sophia said, her expression darkening. Check everything, the evidence cases, our phones, even our clothing. As Diego began scanning their equipment with an electronic device, Sophia turned to Elizabeth. We need to move you to the panic room. It's through the main bedroom, hidden entrance in the closet. I'm not hiding while you two face whoever's out there. Elizabeth protested. Yes, you are. Sophia's tone left no room for argument. You're carrying Charles's child, and you're the only one who can testify that he obtained this evidence legally. Both of you are irreplaceable. Diego's scanner emitted a sharp beep as he passed it over the evidence suitcase. Found it. Tracking device embedded in the lining. Sophisticated. Sophia noted, examining the tiny transmitter. Not something amateurs would use. Government grade. Elizabeth asked. Or close to it. Garrett has high-level connections. Sophia made a decision. Diego, prepare Mrs. Miller for immediate evacuation. I'll deal with our visitors. And how exactly will you deal with them? Elizabeth asked. By giving them what they're tracking, Sophia replied, removing the device and placing it in a small container. While you leave through the back trail with Diego. They'll kill you, Elizabeth said. They'll try. Sophia checked her weapon. But I've been doing this a long time, Mrs. Miller. And unlike Charles, I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. The SUV had stopped at the bottom of the driveway. Through the security monitor, they could see 2 men in suits exiting the vehicle. Go now, Sophia urged. The trail connects to a service road where we have another vehicle waiting. I can't just leave you, Elizabeth insisted. Yes, you can, because that's what Charles would have wanted. Sophia's eyes were steady. He gave his life to protect you and your child. Don't waste his sacrifice. Diego took Elizabeth's arm gently but firmly. This way, Mrs. Miller. Miss Sophia knows what she's doing. As Diego led her toward the back of the house, Elizabeth glanced back at Sophia, who was calmly preparing to face the approaching men. For the first time, she understood exactly why Charles had trusted this woman with his life, and now with her. The safe house in Pasadena looked like any other upper-middle-class suburban home, a perfect place to disappear. Elizabeth sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a borrowed cardigan, while Diego prepared tea. After their narrow escape from Topanga Canyon, with gunfire echoing behind them, they had driven for hours using back roads and switching vehicles twice. Any word from Sophia? Elizabeth asked. Diego shook his head. Not yet, but the protocol is radio silence for 12 hours after separation. What if she didn't make it out? Miss Sophia has escaped worse situations. He placed a steaming mug in front of her. She sent men like those to distract enemy forces in Kiev once, while extracting a defecting scientist. She returned without a scratch. Elizabeth sipped the tea, the familiar ritual providing small comfort in this unfamiliar world. How did you become involved in all this, Diego? I told you about my brother. Yes, but there's more to it, isn't there? The way you handle yourself, the way you speak when operational, you're not just a yacht caretaker. Diego's expression shifted subtly. I was military special forces in my country. After my brother's situation, I made connections with certain agencies. When I came to America, those connections led me to Mr. Charles. You're an operative too, Elizabeth concluded. I am a man who helps where I can, he replied simply. Mr. Charles gave me purpose after I left my old life behind. They both turned as the secure phone on the counter buzzed with a message, package delivered. Returning to base. She's safe, Diego confirmed, and whatever distraction she planned worked. Thank God, Elizabeth murmured, relief washing over her. Diego gestured to a door off the kitchen. You should rest. The bedroom is secure, and I'll keep watch. Elizabeth nodded, exhaustion finally overtaking her. The bedroom was plain but comfortable, with heavy blackout curtains and a surprisingly luxurious bed. On the nightstand was a leather-bound journal she recognized immediately as Charles's. Not the operational log from the yacht, but his personal journal. She sat on the bed, running her fingers over the worn cover. Charles had kept a journal for as long as she'd known him, though she'd never read it, respecting his privacy. Now that concept seemed almost laughable. What privacy when their entire life together had been compartmentalized by secrets? Elizabeth opened the journal, finding entries from the past year. March 15, the Garrett investigation deepens. Evidence of direct involvement in selecting merchandise, as he calls them. Young women primarily. The scale is larger than we initially believed. Sophia advises caution, but I cannot look away from this. Each face in the photographs could be someone's daughter, sister, wife. How many lives destroyed while bureaucrats count their bribes? She turned pages, scanning entries about operational details, interspersed with more personal reflections. April 28. Lizzie noticed I've been distracted, made up a story about shipping contract negotiations. Another lie to add to the tally. The weight of these deceptions grows heavier with each passing year. Started the paperwork for resignation today. Sophia disagrees with the timing, says we're too close to breaking Garrett's operation. She's right professionally, but my heart isn't in this anymore. I want simplicity, truth. The entry that caught her attention most was dated just a week before Charles's death. May 10. Lizzie told me about the baby today. A miracle at our age. I sat in the car afterward and wept, joy and terror in equal measure. Joy for this unexpected blessing, terror at what it means. I've made enemies, dangerous ones. I cannot leave this legacy of threat to my child. The end game with Garrett must be accelerated. Sophia has agreed to expedite the evidence handover. 2 more weeks, and I'll be done with this shadow life forever. I can finally be only one man, not 3. Just Charles Miller, husband to Elizabeth, father to our child. No more lies. Elizabeth wiped away tears. The final entry was dated 3 days before he died. May 14. Meeting with Garrett went poorly. He suspects something. I've prepared the contingencies, secured the evidence in separate locations. If anything happens to me, Sophia knows what to do. I've lived so long with the possibility of my own death that it doesn't frighten me anymore. But the thought of leaving Elizabeth alone, with our child still unborn, that is unbearable. I've recorded messages, prepared letters, established the trust. It's not enough. Nothing could be enough. I hope someday she'll understand why I lived this double life, and perhaps even forgive me for it. Everything I've done, even the deceptions, has been in service of a safer world for those who cannot protect themselves. And now, for our child. She closed the journal, holding it against her heart. For the first time since discovering the hidden room on the Persephone, Elizabeth felt she was hearing her husband's true voice, conflicted, compassionate, caught between worlds but ultimately driven by principles she recognized and shared. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Diego stood in the doorway, expression grave. Sophia just sent another message. Garrett knows about this safe house. We need to leave immediately. How is that possible? Elizabeth gathered the journal. No one followed us. She believes there may be a leak within the organization itself, someone with access to the safe house protocol. Diego checked his watch. A team is on the way to extract us. We have 15 minutes. As Elizabeth hurriedly packed the few possessions they'd brought, a new chilling thought occurred to her. If someone inside Charles's organization was betraying them, then no one could be fully trusted. Not even Sophia. The extraction team arrived precisely when Sophia had promised. 3 operatives in an unmarked van, who spoke little but moved with practiced efficiency. Elizabeth and Diego were taken to a private airstrip where a small jet waited. Sophia stood at the bottom of the boarding stairs, her left arm in a sling, but otherwise appearing unharmed. "You're injured," Elizabeth noted as they approached. "It's nothing. One of Garrett's men got lucky." Sophia dismissed it with a shrug that belied the pain evident in her eyes. More importantly, the diversion worked. "They're still searching Malibu while we move you to a secure location." "Where are we going?" "Northern California. Remote property owned through a shell company. Not even in our official safehouse database." As they boarded the plane, Elizabeth noted the tense atmosphere among Sophia's team, whispered consultations, guarded expressions. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, once they were airborne. Sophia sighed. "We've confirmed there's a leak. Someone with high-level access has been feeding information to Garrett. It's the only explanation for how quickly they found each location." "Do you know who?" "We have suspicions, but nothing concrete. For now, we're operating with a closed circle, only people Charles trusted implicitly." She gestured to the team. "Everyone here worked directly with him for years." Elizabeth studied the operatives, 2 men and a woman, all with the same watchful demeanor she'd observed in Sophia. "Did my husband trust implicitly?" The Charles I knew was naturally skeptical. "In our work, absolute trust is rare," Sophia acknowledged. But Charles had a remarkable ability to read people. These are the ones he selected personally for his most sensitive operations. Diego brought them coffee from the plane's galley. "Miss Sophia, perhaps it's time to show Mrs. Miller the final mission files." Sophia nodded, retrieving a secure tablet. "These are the details of the investigation Charles was completing when he died. The operation was codenamed Persephone's Return. His idea." The screen displayed detailed files on Minister Garrett's trafficking network. Charts mapping the movement of victims through official ports, where inspections had been suspiciously minimal. Financial transactions showing millions flowing through offshore accounts. Witness statements from survivors who had glimpsed Garrett at various staging locations. "Charles gathered all this?" Elizabeth asked, stunned by the scope. "Over 18 months, Sophia confirmed. It started as a standard corruption investigation, but when he discovered the human trafficking connection, it became personal for him." Elizabeth found photos of young women, some appearing drugged, others frightened, being escorted onto ships. These poor girls, ages 16 to 24, primarily from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, Sophia explained grimly. Promised legitimate jobs, then trapped in a nightmare. Charles documented 27 separate shipments over 2 years. And Garrett authorized all of this, not just authorized, profited handsomely. "We traced over $30 million to his accounts." Elizabeth continued scrolling through the evidence until she reached files labeled Minister Meetings. These contained surveillance photos of Garrett meeting with various officials, including, to her shock, a prominent senator. How deep does this go? She whispered. Deep enough that Charles was concerned about interference even after we handed everything to prosecutors. Sophia replied. That's why he created multiple copies of the evidence, stored in separate locations. Diego, who had been monitoring communications, approached urgently. Miss Sophia, we have a situation. Garrett has scheduled a press conference for tomorrow morning. Sophia checked her phone. Sources say he's planning to announce his retirement from government service, effective immediately. He's running, Elizabeth realized. Trying to disappear before the evidence becomes public. Sophia agreed. We need to accelerate our timeline. She began sending rapid messages to her team. The original plan was to coordinate with law enforcement for simultaneous arrests across jurisdictions. But if Garrett escapes, all of this was for nothing, Elizabeth finished. Charles died for nothing. Determination hardened Sophia's expression. That's not going to happen. She pulled up a file showing an incomplete operational plan, Charles's handwriting visible in the margins, with notes about contingencies and backup strategies. This was Charles's final mission design, Sophia explained. He never finished the implementation details, but the framework is solid. Elizabeth studied the document, recognizing the methodical thinking that characterized Charles's approach to everything from business contracts to vacation planning. Even in this unfamiliar context, she could see his mind at work. The key evidence is now secured, Sophia continued. But for the case to be airtight, we need the financial trail and the witness testimonies to come together perfectly, and Charles was the only one with the complete picture. Elizabeth thought of the journals, the meticulous records, Charles's ability to see patterns others missed. Something clicked in her mind, a literary reference Charles had made years ago when discussing a complex shipping negotiation. Did Charles ever mention Ariadne's thread in his operational notes? She asked suddenly. Sophia looked surprised. Yes, actually, it was a phrase he used occasionally, but he never explained its significance. It's from Greek mythology, the thread that helped Theseus navigate the labyrinth. Elizabeth explained, excitement building, but Charles used it as a personal shorthand for solving complex problems. He believed every complicated situation had a single thread that, if followed correctly, would lead to the solution. She turned to the files again with fresh eyes. If I know my husband, he left a path for someone to follow, someone who would understand his thinking. You? Diego suggested. Elizabeth nodded slowly, a sense of purpose filling her for the first time since Charles's death. Yes, I think he expected me to finish what he started, and I believe I know where to find the missing pieces. Sophia and Diego exchanged glances. Where? They asked simultaneously. The labyrinth itself, Elizabeth replied. We need to go back to the Persephone. Returning to the Persephone required careful planning. Garrett's men had the yacht under surveillance. According to Sophia's intelligence, the team devised a strategy to approach by water during the pre-dawn hours, using a fishing boat as cover. Elizabeth stood on the deck of the small vessel as it approached the marina, the Persephone's elegant silhouette visible in the distance. Sophia joined her, night vision binoculars in hand. 2 watchers, Sophia reported. One at the main entrance, one in a car overlooking the slip. Can we get past them? Elizabeth asked. Already arranged. Local police will respond to a disturbance at the north end of the marina in approximately 5 minutes. Our people created a convincing scenario involving drunk tourists and valuable boats. Sure enough, minutes later, flashing lights appeared at the marina entrance. The surveillance car moved toward the commotion. Now, Sophia signaled. Their small craft slipped alongside the Persephone's hull. Diego helped Elizabeth aboard via the same hidden access point they'd used to escape days earlier. Within moments, they were inside the yacht's main cabin. We have maybe 15 minutes before they realize the distraction doesn't require both watchers, Sophia warned. Whatever you're looking for, we need to find it quickly. Elizabeth moved directly to Charles's study, examining the room with fresh eyes. Ariadne's thread, she murmured. What would that mean to Charles in this context? Her gaze fell on Charles's collection of leather-bound books, classics mostly, many first editions he'd collected over the years. Among them was Dante's Inferno, which Charles had often quoted. "In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood," she recited, removing the volume from the shelf. Inside the front cover was Charlie's book plate, with their wedding date, but something seemed off. The plate was slightly askew. Elizabeth carefully peeled back one corner, revealing a small key hidden behind it. "What does that open?" Diego asked. "Not sure yet," Elizabeth replied, scanning the room. Her attention turned to the desk specifically, to a small wooden puzzle box. Charles had kept there for years. He'd claimed it was a souvenir from Japan, a decorative piece he enjoyed fidgeting with during phone calls. Elizabeth had never seen it open. The key fit perfectly into a nearly invisible slot on the box's underside. With a soft click, panels shifted, and the box opened, revealing a micro SD card and a folded note in Charles's handwriting. "If you're reading this, you've followed Ariadne's thread. The complete financial records are here. The final piece Garrett doesn't know I have. Offshore accounts, transaction histories, shell companies. Everything needed to freeze his assets and prevent escape. But be careful who sees this. The betrayal comes from within. Trust only those who knew about Corsica." "Cease. Corsica." Sophia frowned. "The operation 3 years ago." Elizabeth remembered the photographs she'd seen. Charles and Sophia posed as a wealthy couple. Who knew about that mission? It was highly compartmentalized. Just Charles, myself, Diego, and Sophia's expression changed. "And Reeves, our director, could he be the leak?" Elizabeth asked. "Impossible. He's been with the agency 30 years. Charles reported directly to him. Despite her words, doubt had entered Sophia's voice. Elizabeth inserted the micro SD card into the laptop they'd brought. The files loaded immediately. Detailed records of transactions between Garrett and the second party, identified only as oversight. "These are payments," Sophia said, scanning the documents. "Millions of dollars transferred to someone who was protecting Garrett's operation." "Look at the dates," Diego pointed out. "They correspond with scheduled inspections of Garrett's shipping operations that were mysteriously cancelled or redirected. Someone with authority to change official operations," Sophia murmured, the implications sinking in. Elizabeth noticed a hidden folder on the drive, labeled simply R. Inside was a single video file. She clicked play. The footage showed an elegant restaurant. Garrett sat at a corner table with another man whose face was initially hidden from the camera. When he turned, Sophia gasped audibly. "Reeves," she whispered. The video had no audio, but the interaction was clear. Documents changing hands, handshakes, Reeves pocketing something that Garrett passed him beneath the table. "The date stamp," Diego noted. 1 week before Charles died. Elizabeth felt a chill. Charles discovered his own director was corrupt, and reported directly to him about the investigation, Sophia added grimly, giving Reeves everything he needed to protect Garrett and himself. This is why Charles created separate evidence caches, Elizabeth realized. He didn't trust the official channels, and why he encoded that message about Corsica, Sophia said. Reeves was the only senior official who knew about that operation, because he had to approve our cover as a couple. Elizabeth's mind raced. If Reeves is oversight, and he knows we're gathering Charles's evidence, then he knows we're close to exposing him too, Sophia finished, pulling out her secure phone. "I need to warn the team. If Reeves realizes we've found this connection." The phone rang in her hand. The caller ID showed Director Reeves. Sophia looked at Elizabeth, then Diego. "He's calling to find out what we know." "Answer it," Elizabeth said. "But don't let him know we're on the Persephone." Sophia nodded, composing herself before answering. "Sir, yes, we're making progress." She listened, her expression carefully neutral. "No, we haven't fully decoded all of Charles's evidence yet." "Yes, I understand the urgency with Garrett's planned departure." As she spoke, Diego silently alerted them to movement on the dock. Figures approaching the Persephone, from both sides. "We need to move," he mouthed silently. Sophia continued smoothly. "We're following a promising lead now. Yes, I'll report in when we have the complete financial records." She ended the call, immediately switching to operational mode. He's sending a support team to our last known location. Claims it's for our protection. To eliminate us and the evidence, Elizabeth concluded. And those men outside aren't Garrett's, Diego added, checking the security feed. Their agency. Sophia made a swift decision. New plan. We copy this evidence, then make our presence known. Create a distraction while you two escape with the original. And you? Elizabeth asked. I'll convince Reeves I don't have the financial evidence yet. Buy us time. Sophia checked her weapon. Diego, get Mrs. Miller out through the underwater hatch. I'll meet you at the contingency point. As Diego prepared their exit route, Elizabeth caught Sophia's arm. He'll kill you once he has what he wants. Probably, Sophia acknowledged calmly. But this was Charles's final mission. I intend to see it completed. Elizabeth recognized the same quiet determination she'd seen in Charles's journal. These people had lived by a code she was only beginning to understand, one that placed mission above personal safety. There's another way, she said suddenly, one that uses Reeves's corruption against him. Elizabeth's plan was audacious, but leveraged a simple truth. Corrupt men fear exposure above all else. With Reeves's team closing in on the Persephone, they worked rapidly to implement it. It's ready, Diego announced, finishing the digital preparations while Sophia kept watch. Elizabeth nodded, steeling herself. Then let's invite them aboard. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You're sure about this? Charles would have done the same. Elizabeth placed a protective hand over her belly. For them, for all of them. Sophia signaled to the men on the dock, a simple all-clear gesture that brought them cautiously aboard. 4 operatives entered the main salon, weapons discreetly holstered but clearly ready. Director Reeves was concerned about your safety, the lead agent said to Sophia. Thoughtful of him, Sophia replied neutrally. We've located critical evidence. We'll take it from here, he stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Elizabeth stepped forward. Actually, I'd prefer to deliver it personally to Director Reeves. After all, this evidence is what got my husband killed. The agents exchanged glances. That's not protocol, ma'am. Perhaps not, Elizabeth agreed. But considering Charles Miller was poisoned under the director's watch, I believe I'm entitled to some consideration. Her directness created momentary uncertainty, exactly as she'd intended. The director is very busy, one began. Tell him I have the complete financial records. Elizabeth interrupted. The ones showing who oversight is. Ask him if he'd like me to deliver them to him, or to the Attorney General instead. This produced the desired effect. After a brief consultation, the lead agent made a call. Elizabeth could hear only one side of the conversation, but the tension in the room was palpable. Yes, sir, she specifically mentioned. Yes, sir. Understood. He turned to Elizabeth. Director Reeves will see you. Just you. Not happening, Sophia interjected. Where Mrs. Miller goes, we go. Another negotiation, another call. Finally, an agreement. Elizabeth, Sophia, and Diego would be escorted to a private location to meet Reeves. As they prepared to leave, Elizabeth gave Diego a subtle nod. He pressed a button on his phone, executing the first part of their contingency plan. The meeting location was a luxurious beachfront property in Malibu, isolated, private, and undoubtedly swept for recording devices. Director Reeves waited on the terrace, a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and an air of absolute authority. He greeted them with practiced warmth that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Miller, I cannot express how sorry I am about Charles. He was one of our finest. Thank you, Elizabeth replied, her expression carefully neutral. Though I believe you had a unique way of showing your appreciation for his work. Reeves's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I've always supported Charles's operations, which is why I'm personally overseeing the completion of his final mission. How commendable, Elizabeth said. Though I wonder, does Minister Garrett appreciate your sudden enthusiasm for bringing his network down? The atmosphere shifted instantly. Reeves signaled, and his security personnel stepped out, leaving just the 4 of them on the terrace. I'm not sure I follow, Reeves said carefully. Elizabeth removed a tablet from her bag, sliding it across the table. Perhaps these will clarify things. Reeves reviewed the files, the same financial records and video footage they'd discovered on the Persephone. His expression remained controlled, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Interesting material, he said finally, though I should warn you about making accusations based on incomplete information. That video shows a sanctioned meeting with Garrett. I was gathering intelligence by accepting payments. Sophia asked. The financial records show regular transfers to oversight correlating perfectly with your meetings. Fabrications, Reeves dismissed, easily created by someone with Charles's technical skills. Perhaps, Elizabeth conceded. But would all these be fabrications too? She nodded to Diego, who activated a secure link on his phone. The terrace's hidden screens illuminated with dozens of images. Reeves with Garrett in various locations, documents changing hands, offshore account statements, email exchanges. Charles didn't trust you, Elizabeth explained. He created a shadow investigation, documenting your involvement for months. Everything is time-stamped, authenticated, and she added with quiet emphasis, already delivered to multiple secure locations. Reeves's composure finally cracked. What do you want? Justice, Elizabeth stated simply, for Charles, for the victims of Garrett's trafficking network, for everyone you've betrayed. You have no idea how the real world works, Reeves said, his tone hardening. These operations generate intelligence that saves lives. Compromises are necessary. Selling young women into slavery isn't a compromise, Elizabeth countered. It's a crime. One my husband died trying to stop. Reeves leaned back, reassessing the situation. Let's be brutal. What you have is circumstantial. My reputation against a dead man's files. Even if some of this reached Drassel channels, I'd have time to disappear. Sophia interrupted. Like Garrett is planning to do tomorrow. That would be difficult, considering the FBI has already received an anonymous package with preliminary evidence. Reeves's face darkened. You're bluffing. Am I? Elizabeth held his gaze. The moment we boarded the Persephone, we activated Charles's final protocol. A complete evidence package was automatically uploaded to secure servers with instructions for delivery to multiple law enforcement agencies if we don't enter a cancellation code every 3 hours. She checked her watch. The next deadline is in 45 minutes. You can't do this, Reeves said, his confident facade crumbling. You have no idea the forces you're challenging. Actually, I do, Elizabeth replied. My husband spent his life challenging them. Now I'm finishing what he started. Reeves's hand moved toward his jacket, but Sophia was faster, her weapon appearing as if from nowhere. Don't, she advised quietly. You trained me, remember? The standoff lasted several tense seconds before Reeves slowly raised his hands. What happens now, he asked. Elizabeth slid a phone across the table. You call Garrett, tell him the evidence has been secured and destroyed. Arrange to meet him before his press conference tomorrow. And then, Sophia said, you both face justice for Charles's murder and for every life destroyed by your network. Reeves stared at the phone, calculating his options. Finally, he picked it up and dialed. Richard? It's me. We need to talk. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the federal building as Elizabeth watched the operation unfold on multiple screens. After a night of careful planning with trustworthy officials Sophia had vetted personally, the net was closing around both Reeves and Garrett. Minister Garrett has arrived at the meeting point, reported an agent monitoring the surveillance feed. On the screen, Elizabeth watched as Garrett, distinguished, confident, utterly unaware of what awaited him, entered the private dining room of an exclusive downtown restaurant. Reeves was already seated, his cooperation secured through a combination of overwhelming evidence and the promise of reduced charges. Audio is live, another technician confirmed, adjusting the volume. The conversation began with mundane pleasantries, but quickly turned to business. Following the script prepared by federal prosecutors, Reeves guided the discussion toward their shared operations. All the evidence has been contained. Reeves assured Garrett. Miller's widow had no idea what she actually found. "Your cert?" Garrett asked, the first hint of relaxation showing in his posture. "Completely, the financial records, the witness statements, all secured. After your announcement today, the trail goes cold." Garrett nodded, satisfied. "Good. The new identities are prepared, waiting in Zurich, as arranged. And the funds? 30 million divided between the accounts we established. Untraceable." Elizabeth felt a chill hearing them discuss their escape so casually, men who had facilitated untold suffering, planning to disappear with millions while leaving destruction in their wake. "All units in position," announced the operation leader. "Move on my mark." Garrett leaned closer to Reeves. "What about the Miller woman? Is she a loose end?" Elizabeth tensed, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. Reeves hesitated just long enough for concern to flash across Garrett's face. "You've handled it. Consider it resolved," Reeves replied smoothly, following the script. "After today, Elizabeth Miller will no longer be a concern." Garrett studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. I admit, I underestimate her husband. A shipping executive playing spy. Who would have thought he'd get so close? Close enough to die for it," Reeves added. "A regrettable necessity," Garrett said dismissively, "though your method was elegant. Heart attack, so natural for a man his age." Elizabeth's breath caught. Here was the confession they needed, directly implicating both men in Charles's murder. "The substance was your contribution," Reeves acknowledged. "Untraceable, as promised." "One of many benefits from our pharmaceutical connections," Garrett replied with a chilling smile. "Speaking of which, the latest shipment of girls includes a doctor's daughter from Ukraine. Talented, from what I hear. I've set her aside for your personal consideration." "Mark," the operation leader commanded. Within seconds, federal agents swarmed the restaurant. On the screen, Elizabeth watched Garrett's expression shift from confusion to shock to cold rage as he was handcuffed and read his rights. Reeves, playing his part in the operation, feigned similar outrage until he too was secured. "We got them," Sophia said quietly, standing beside Elizabeth, both confessing to Charles's murder and to human trafficking. "It's over." Elizabeth nodded, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. Justice for Charles, yes, but also the stark reality that her husband had died confronting genuine evil. Men who viewed human lives as commodities. Mrs. Miller, a senior Justice Department official, approached with a leather portfolio. "These require your signature." Inside were documents establishing the Lighthouse Foundation, Charles's legacy project, now ready to launch with federal cooperation. The foundation would work with law enforcement to identify trafficking victims, provide support services, and fund preventative education in vulnerable communities. "Charles designed the framework," the official explained. "We've expanded it based on the evidence he gathered. With your approval, the foundation will be funded using assets seized from Garrett's network." "Poetic justice," Elizabeth murmured, signing the papers. "There's more," Sophia added, opening a second folder. "These are the trust documents Charles prepared for your child." Elizabeth reviewed the arrangements Charles had made: financial security, educational provisions, and a letter to be opened when their child turned 18, explaining the work that had defined the final years of their father's life. "He thought of everything," Elizabeth said softly. "It was his way," Sophia agreed. "Charles left nothing to chance when it came to protecting what mattered most to him." As the operation room buzzed with activity, agents securing evidence, prosecutors preparing statements, officials coordinating the broader takedown of the trafficking network, Elizabeth found herself drawn to a window overlooking the city. In the weeks since discovering the hidden room on the Persephone, her understanding of Charles had been fundamentally transformed. The comfortable, somewhat distant husband she'd known for decades had concealed extraordinary courage, compassion, and conviction. "Miss Miller," called an agent from across the room. "We've just received word that coordinated arrests are underway in 6 countries. Garrett's entire network is coming down simultaneously." Charles would be pleased, she said, turning from the window. This was his life's work. Sophia noted. What happens next is up to you. Elizabeth considered the question. The foundation, the trust, the yacht, all legacies of a man she was still coming to understand. What would she do with them? Her hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling the strong kicks of the child within. Charles's final gift, a future extending beyond the darkness he had fought against. Next, Elizabeth said, with quiet determination, we honor his work by continuing it, not in shadows, but in light. 6 weeks whereas Elizabeth stood at the bow of the Persephone as it cut through gentle swells, the coastline of California receding behind them. At 8.5 months pregnant, she moved carefully, one hand supporting her back, the other resting on the polished railing. Diego managed the yacht with quiet efficiency, having agreed to stay on as captain. Sophia stood at the navigation controls, plotting their course. A short journey just for the day. How are you feeling? Sophia asked, joining Elizabeth at the railing. Ready, Elizabeth replied, gazing out at the horizon. In more ways than one. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of activity. Garrett and Reeves faced multiple federal charges, their network dismantled piece by piece. The Lighthouse Foundation had launched with Elizabeth as its director, already coordinating support for dozens of trafficking survivors. And most personally, Elizabeth had sorted through the complexities of Charles's double life, integrating the man she'd known with the one she'd discovered. Charles loved the open water, Elizabeth mused. I never truly understood why, until now. Freedom, Sophia suggested. Possibility. Yes, Elizabeth agreed. And perspective. Everything looks different from out here. They reached their destination, a quiet stretch of ocean where, according to the coordinates in Charles's final instructions, he had completed his first rescue operation. Elizabeth opened the small wooden box she'd brought from home, which contained a portion of Charles's ashes. He wanted to rest in the places that meant the most to him, she explained. Part at home in our garden, part at sea where he found his true purpose. Diego cut the engines, allowing the Persephone to drift peacefully. The three of them gathered at the stern, each connected to Charles in profoundly different ways, yet bound together by his final mission. Would you like to say something? Sophia asked. Elizabeth nodded, taking a moment to find the right words. Charles Miller lived between worlds, she began, husband and operative, businessman and rescuer. He compartmentalized his life out of necessity, but his heart was always whole, always guided by the same principles. She opened the box. The ocean breeze gentle against her face. I release you here where your journey truly began, where you first chose to act, rather than simply observe, where purpose found you. Elizabeth scattered the ashes into the water, watching as they disappeared beneath the surface. Your child will know all of you, she promised softly. Not just the man I married, but the man you became when you thought no one was watching. After a moment of silence, Diego restarted the engines, guiding the Persephone in a wide arc to return to shore. Elizabeth remained at the stern, watching the spot where Charles's ashes had merged with the sea. Sophia approached, holding out a small box. I have something for you for the baby, actually, from Charles. Inside was a tiny silver pendant, a lighthouse, meticulously crafted. He had it made when you told him about the pregnancy, Sophia explained. Said he wanted his child to remember that lighthouses don't just warn of danger, they guide people home. Elizabeth closed her fingers around the pendant, tears welling in her eyes. Even now, Charles was still revealing himself to her, still finding ways to connect across the divide that had separated them. As the Persephone turned toward shore, Elizabeth felt the baby shift and stretch within her. Soon, very soon, this new life would begin, carrying forward Charles's legacy in ways yet to be discovered. Ready to head home? Sophia asked. Elizabeth nodded, her gaze taking in the Persephone. No longer just a yacht, but a vessel of revelation, a keeper of secrets now brought to light. Yes, she said, we're ready.